Boom. There we go. Welcome to What's Up Asia. I'm Hikosaemon, and I am here with...
my name is Steve Miller. Good to see you again, my friend.
Yes. I feel so completely vocally inadequate actually trying to talk next to you. I'm going to have to try. No, I can't. I'm not even going to try. But yes. So, I mean, I guess most people here know who Steve Miller is, otherwise known as Mr. Asia News Weekly. Your podcast is kicking ass, I believe.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, we're having a lot of fun doing the podcast. Started off as an audio-only podcast, and the last few months have brought it up to a full video podcast as well, and it's still ranking really high in both iTunes and Stitcher, and this past week has done remarkably well here on YouTube as well.
So, ranking-wise, how is it? Can I ask? What are your stats?
So on iTunes, if you look in Asian News Weekly, I think today is 18 as a top 18. And then over in Stitcher for World News, Asian News Weekly is 9th.
Wow. So that's pretty cool. So, yeah, I guess most people here already know this. And no, he is not in the Steve Miller band. So those rumors are completely false. I do kind of actually like how, not only do you kind of look like Captain Picard, but it's like you are standing in a space background. It's very...
There's nothing behind me.
That's right. You're reporting from the International Space Station, actually. It's
well, up above, I do have clips. So if I ever want to do a green screen, I could drop the green screen behind me and do a bridge shot.
Yeah, well, I'm actually seriously thinking about how do I set something like that up for when I move house for next time. I'd love to have a green screen. I kind of like, I've got my standard background at the moment with moving boxes and crap at the moment, but yes, I would like to very much do that. Also, getting into the new stuff, I'm very glad to see you apparently do not have MERS at this moment.
No,
everybody there had it. I thought it was like really the thing at the moment.
Well, I mean, that is certainly the biggest story coming out of South Korea. Do you want to start with MERS, since that's probably the biggest story in Asia at the moment? Well, there's two big stories. We got the China ferry sinking and MERS. So which one do you want to kick off with?
Well, I mean, you're in South Korea. I'm in Japan. At the moment, Japan, people are talking about, we're having Asiana flights fly over that they're not even spraying. So everyone's like, okay, so this is going to come to Japan, and so everyone's looking at Korea at the moment. So as someone in Korea, someone on the ground, what the hell's going on there?
Well, I mean, it really depends, and this is really interesting now. So where I live, we actually had one of the deaths. So there's been 2 deaths attributed to MERS, and one of them happened in our city.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're in the middle of the whole crisis, if you want to call it that way. And people have been losing their minds since about Sunday night here in our area. In fact, what?
Just to be clear, it's a type of mental disease, from what I can tell. It's like it affects the brain and makes people. Is that what it is?
No, not so much that, but it's very much the typical overreaction that you see from many in South Korea.
Yeah.
But this is so, down in Pyeongtaek, down in the southern half of Gyeonggi province, so where I live, because that's where a lot of the MERS cases have been. About 30 minutes from me in Pyeongtaek is where about 2/3 of the MERS cases are, and then some closer to me. People here are really concerned, really overreacting in terms of what's going on. So even before the provincial government opted to cancel classes based on public parental, calling the offices, our city canceled classes. Even the private academies canceled classes ahead of time.
Yeah.
They were just so concerned. But then if I go up to teach or go into Seoul, it's pretty much a non-issue. People are a little bit more concerned, but have a more measured response to it.
But I mean, this is also, I remember there was actually like a panic in South Korea when Japan had with the Fukushima accident,
Oh,
Korea kind of went
the
crazy about that as
Fukushima
well.
accident, people lost their freaking mind. I mean, the first rainstorm after that, I mean, I kid you not, there were government warnings and warnings, don't go outside because of the rain. It's going to carry over the radiation and we're going to be irradiated here. Schools were canceled. I mean, there's so much information, and unfortunately, there's such a high level of distrust for the South Korean government that people really don't do their due diligence in looking at particular facts to get a well-informed opinion.
Yeah.
So a lot of people today really don't understand, what MERS is. And Lucas points it out in the comments: Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, a variant of the cold virus, the same family there, a coronavirus. But people just really don't have a clue of what it really goes into. I mean, even on, was it Tuesday, the government put out warnings: don't touch camels and don't eat uncooked camel meat, and that was from the Ministry of Health, which was.
So yes, I don't read Hangul
There it is, yeah.
characters, but this looks like it's saying don't engage in animal husbandry with cows and don't drink camel milk.
Well, no, but part of it was don't drink camel milk, don't touch camels, which is what even the WHO recommends. Don't eat uncooked camel meat. The camels at the Seoul Zoo were put into sequestered areas. But I mean, where do people, like, when people see that image from the Ministry of Health, people, the first thing comes to mind is like, who eats camel meat?
Yeah.
No one eats camel meat.
I mean, this is rapidly like the AIDS monkey thing, isn't it? It's like, okay, who did it with the camel and started all of this?
Yeah, I mean, the part of the problem is that the government hasn't released what hospitals people have been to. We have right now, last count, 30 confirmed cases, 2 deaths, 1,300 plus people that have been isolated, and they're like, yeah, we have it under control. We're having the task force, the WHO are sending people out here. But there's just that high level of distrust, especially after the Sewol ferry, that they just don't believe the government has their stuff together. And they're just really taking things as the worst case scenario is really happening versus, if you look back, I mean, and it's the same thing as a swine flu in 2009. It's the same exact behavior.
Yeah. I don't know. Actually, being in isolation in Korea doesn't sound all that bad. I was reading today about a lady who was in isolation who went and played golf. And everyone was like, well, I know, everyone was like, what's she doing? So that became major news that somebody played golf. But yeah. But I don't know. It's funny because it seems one extreme or the next as well. I was watching a video by Charlotte in Japan, recommended this Korean vlogger, American in Korea, who's talking about how living in Korea has changed her. And she mentioned how she used to be so paranoid about germs in America, but since she goes to Korea, like, people customarily share food all the time and eat out of the same dishes and stuff like that. And so she's kind of lost a lot of her, her anxiety about germiness. I don't know, so maybe more than Japan.
But see, that's one of the things that just strikes me not as odd is that you have all the doomsaying information about MERS coming out in the media, and not only just Korean media, but all the media. Right. And then the last little sentence on there, it says, well, if you're going to get MERS, you typically have to be in direct contact with somebody. You typically are an older person or a younger person with some kind of immunodeficiency or some other respiratory illness already. The 2 people that died had really significant health issues, so they were immunocompromised. And then the biggest things is, hey, if you cover your mouth when you cough and you wash your hands frequently, then you're pretty good. Practice good hygiene and you're good to go. But unfortunately, in Korea, washing hands and covering your mouth when you cough are 2 things that just don't happen all that often. Right.
Japanese really are germaphobes, and they really do, like, when that going on in Korea, they're going to put out the disinfectants everywhere, and my wife makes me gargle 10 times a day and all this sort of stuff as well. But I can kind of see how, with the Well, for example, so with the cultural practice, for example, this was the big problem with SARS. In China as well, they had to tell everyone, stop spitting, please, just don't do it, because it was contributing to it. But it's kind of hard when there are things which contribute. I mean, in 2 days, it's gone from like they identified the one original carrier, and then he gave it to the rest of his family. Then one of his family members thought it'd be a really good idea to get on a plane and go to Hong Kong.
Well, and that's the thing that people here are really upset about, is that, and I was interviewed by one of the papers today, and I made the same comment, is that I think the healthcare in South Korea is really good.
Yeah.
But when you throw these things that you never see in South Korea against a normal doctor, they aren't thinking about that. And my example was, I like to travel to Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
And there's mosquitoes in Southeast
Asia. Right.
And my concern is that if I ever caught dengue coming back here, would they be able to correctly identify that before I got really ill? Yeah. And I don't think they would, just because running the dengue fever test in a blood test would not be, the top of the list for someone here versus someone in Southeast Asia.
That's a great example, because that's exactly what happened in Tokyo about 6 months ago. Dengue fever out, and people have been suspecting there has probably been low-level dengue fever in Japan the whole time, but there hasn't been a detected, specified outbreak for about 30 years. So they had these people with these super high fevers that were going to hospital, and they just weren't being diagnosed. But there were enough people getting diagnosed at the same time, and someone who recently came back from Southeast Asia, that someone thought about that, and then they realized all of these people have dengue fever, and they started tracing to it. But then there was this hysteria about, don't go to that park.
They closed the park and all the other fumigation stuff there. But yeah, so like you said, the one guy got it. He went from clinic A to clinic B to hospital C to hospital D, and that's where all these secondary infections came about.
Oh, so that's what I was going to ask you. How did it get the 30 people in 2 days? Because it isn't supposed to be easy to contract, right? So
well, that's the thing. So he came back. So this guy came back from the Middle East on a business trip or whatever. Yeah. It's still unclear how he actually contracted it there, but he came back here. Wasn't on the flight? He was asymptomatic. Yeah. Got back to Korea, started feeling ill, went to the hospital. They couldn't figure out anything wrong, so he went to another hospital, another clinic. And it wasn't until the fourth clinic that they finally kind of pieced things together. So while he's at these hospitals, he's sharing rooms with people and interacting with people in the hallway and stuff. And that's how it spread. Now, I believe there's only a few cases so far that are in that third generation that didn't have direct contact with patient number one. Right. So that's what they're really worried about, is these tertiary cases from people that didn't have direct contact.
And for these fatal cases, I mean, there's an important point there as well. Is it actually caused by the disease, or did someone just have a fan on in the room at the time that they were sick?
The ever-present fan death. Well, I mean, and you'll see this number go back and forth as well. Anywhere between 20 and 40%. The WHO puts it at 30 to 40% for the mortality rate for this.
Crazy, but you have to presume that's because it happens in areas without really access to the right medical care. I mean, that must be a contributing thing.
Well, I mean, I don't think that necessarily is it, because I mean, we saw it in Hong Kong and other places, the Middle East. I mean, Middle East has pretty good healthcare as well. The issue is that when you get MERS, typically you're already immunocompromised, and you typically already have a respiratory problem. So this is a virus that attacks the respiratory system, which is already fighting some other disease. So it just exasperates it even more.
Yeah, I mean, 40%, that's actually probably statistically comparable to, or even higher than, like Ebola.
Yeah, I mean,
it wasn't that fun.
Yeah, it's no joke. But, as long as you're healthy and you practice good hygiene, still the chances of you getting it are pretty slim. I mean, just like if you go into a room with someone who has a cold, same family of viruses, just because you're in the same room doesn't mean you're going to get it, as long as you are healthy and, wash and clean.
Extremely paranoid, and you ostracize those people and you keep them far.
Throw them down the basement.
Throw them down the basement. That's right. That's the best. So that's the conclusion on that particular story. You mentioned seawall before, and perhaps now China. Well, I guess in some ways you can see the difference between what happens when you have a seawall in Korea and when you have it in China, because the new, I don't know how the coverage there is at the moment, but the Japanese news coverage was featuring how much in control of the news story the Chinese government has taken at the moment of that ferry. And you know what? They probably looked at what happened in South Korea and the damage that the seawall did to the government there, and they're thinking, we're not going to let anybody write a,
Well, yeah, I mean, we're talking. I mean, a dozen or so people were rescued. Right, this is if you don't know what's going on, a ferry capsized in the Yangtze River a few days ago. I believe yesterday. 450 plus people were on board.
Yeah.
Several trapped below the surface. A dozen or so rescued. But yeah, I mean, you were right. I mean, Chinese media was very much on top of it. They, had rescue crews right on the scene. Even the premier flew down from Beijing to kind of oversee things. But there are a lot of similarities too.
Yeah.
The helmsman and the captain were two that were rescued. The majority of the passengers are elderly, and they're hopefully trapped underneath. And because when the divers were there, they banged on the hull and they got responses back.
Oh, they did. I didn't realize that. Actually.
Yeah, at least that was the last news report I read.
But I don't know. I mean, so I didn't hear any of that. I watched the NHK news tonight, and they were kind of focusing on, China's being China. So, they allowed the foreign news to come by all together on a single government-controlled boat for 10 minutes on a controlled, go past. And then they were kept like a kilometer away. And also the families were kept a kilometer away. But for some reason, they thought it was a good idea to keep the angry families together with the foreign media a kilometer away. Like that would control the story.
Oh. See, that's just not smart. But I'm all for keeping the families away and having controlled media access, just so the rescue operators can do their job unimpeded, or do like a limited pool. You get two domestic and two foreigners, and they share all the information with all the wire services, just so there's a certain degree of transparency. But
they were showing the front pages of all the newspapers, all the major newspapers ran with the same photo. It was a Xinhua, photo.
Was on it.
Yeah, well,
they had to control it.
Oh, they were writing the story before it happened, probably. So yeah, and all the headlines, almost word for word, the content of the columns, the photos that were being used were identical between all the competing newspapers. So the government was absolutely controlling that story. But you know what it reminds me of, actually, more than the seawall? It reminds me of the high-speed train crash as well. You remember that in the middle of that storm where they had the high-speed trains head-on crash?
Oh, yeah.
And you remember that? I mean, it was kind of, I guess it's China. They move quickly, but, they actually buried the train with people still inside it on the site. And then they were running trains again 2 days later on the same site, and they were keeping the families away. It was kind of like, whoa.
No. Don't look here. There is no problem.
Well, yeah, we nothing to see here. Move along.
Nothing to see here.
But I guess this is the whole thing about maybe it's the advantage that the Chinese government has over South Korea. That you are, people sometimes forget, but you're in a country where the government, the media is coercively and directly controlled by the government.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you take any time to read the Chinese press, you see that, because it's just rubber stamp of whatever the party wants, versus what comes out in they got the other pieces of it.
So you follow Asian news. I know you follow a lot of different news sources and so on that pick up stuff from China. You do hear every now and then about, this newspaper got a little bit too lippy about, corrupt local officials or something, and, they got pulled down or whatever. But you can see, and culturally, that Chinese are not intrinsically respectful of authority to begin with, right? I mean, it's Chinese government people actually even use that as a justification for the coercion that we have to do it because you don't understand. We're crazy. But there is, I don't know, media. It's to the extent that media is permitted to be critical or is permitted to actually show energy and initiative, they do stuff, right? It's just kind of. Do you really think the whole thing there is that nailed down?
I think to a certain degree it is, because if you look at the way Xi Jinping is running the country, if you veer too far off message, then you just disappear. I mean, even look at this the drama in China right now that was just yanked.
They're all on a vacation. It's like a beautiful resort camp. They're having such a good time. They don't need to contact anybody. That's fine. You don't need to worry about them.
Yeah.
They're being re-educated in labor camps in the far west. One really interesting example. One thing I found fascinating. So you watched the pollution documentary?
Under the Dome, yeah.
That was great. I mean, and they did shut her down, actually, that journalist. And, they very quietly, they left a bit of a gap of time and they started winding it all back afterwards. But what was fascinating about that was open subversion by a government ministry itself, by a powerless government ministry against the greater government. So they actually, she actually had a legitimate government pass to make that. And she was going around with the pollution inspectors and watching them just get harassed and, humiliated by all of these coal companies and stuff like that.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was a brilliant,
that was so good.
Brilliant documentary. And, you could see how she was trying to channel Al Gore in it. And it was a little bit too, I guess, produced for my take, just like with Inconvenient Truth. But
the headpiece on stage or whatever. But the thing is that, nobody in journalism in China ever gets a chance to stand on stage and criticize the national system like that, in that way,
exactly,
with the government behind you, with this being posted on the government agency side. I mean, I imagine that probably a lot of those heads of the Environment Agency are probably on long extended vacations at the moment.
Been reassigned.
I'm sure they've been assigned to
creatively reassigned.
Yeah, cultural education duties. But yeah, I thought that was super cool. And I used to work in environmental policy consulting in Japan, and it was kind of funny actually, because Japan, of course, does these massive studies of how environmental regulations have worked in Europe and America, and cherry picks what they think are the best practices and the best fit for Japan, and then they do their own local regulations based on that. But even that, they did that a lot in the 70s and the 80s, kind of a few years after EPA and so on. But China is now doing that kind of with a new fresh view, and they've actually got really, really good model legislation. They've got a lot of very motivated, very smart people. A lot of smart people who come out of Beijing University go straight into the Environment Ministry, even though it's got no power and no pay, because they're just passionate about the issue. And they have great legislation, but it's not, as they highlighted in that documentary, it's just the enforceability of it. But it's actually so good that Japan actually studies the model legislation that the Chinese made, because it's considered to be the idealized good legislation.
Well, I mean, looking at China, I mean, the thing that I think is just remarkable is how they can just turn it off and get those blue skies back.
Oh yeah.
The mechanism that they have in place to get that Beijing blue sky, given how polluted it is, and and like she said, it's all about the money. It's all about the money and what you can rake in with those plants being operational. And that's what it's going to be around the world. It's all about the money. How much money can you get, and how much can you pay off the politicians in one way or the other to get what you need to done?
But Xi Jinping, I mean, he is supposedly, or certainly, it's either a massive purge or it's a cleanup drive. I guess they're kind of the same thing. But they seem to be aware of that. But the other thing, so this is a whole thing where everyone, I think, always underestimates China, because people too easily forget that thing, that yes, that government is basically completely in control of anything it wants to be in control of. It can't, it's a huge country. It can't control everything at once. But if you draw attention or whatever, if it decides, okay, screw all this dancing around the Spratly Islands, we're just gonna, we're going to take a few reefs that no one can stand on, and we're going to turn them into 20 highly militarized, fortresses, and we're going to do that on a weekend with 1,000 ships. I mean, they can do that.
Yeah. Well, see, that was the thing that was interesting to watch this past weekend over the Shangri-La Dialogue. Yeah. Basically everything that I've been talking about and had guests on to talk about for the last year, it finally is starting to come to a head. So you have all the ASEAN members, all the U.S. people starting to use quote unquote stronger language against China. It's like, and then you have Aquino over in Tokyo today, comparing China to Nazi Germany and their expansionist behaviors.
Yeah, well, they don't like him anyway, do they? I guess it's not going to do any damage to his image. But you know what? I mean, Russia and China, I think they are kind of taking the piss. And I think that they've kind of cottoned on that, the West doesn't seem to mind going into, third world countries with drones and technology and people and killing 200,000 people, and Afghanistan and Somalia and Iraq used to be much more developed, but after putting it through 2 wars and 20 years of sanctions, okay, let's invade now. But going into Ukraine or going into Crimea or going into the Spratlys, America is always, peace in the region has been kept through the belief in American readiness to use force to contain anyone trying to change the status quo. And China's just been kind of sitting there waiting, and you can see Russia's testing them and China's testing them, and basically all they're getting is strongly worded letters to the editor, basically in response.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I said this a year ago. It's like, unless you actually do something to halt the behavior, blockade or some other kind of, more than just words. China has the area. They have the militarized islands now. It's theirs, and you can't push them back after it becomes an operational area.
How feeble did America look on the weekend with its reconnaissance planes flying over what were clearly now completely made fortified artificial islands?
Oh yeah,
saying no, these aren't Chinese islands. We're flying over international waters and we have a right to fly here. But look down, dude. I know it wasn't there a week ago, but it's there now.
What's defined as international and what's in reality is international do not match up anymore.
Well, this is the thing, and actually, and this was always something when I used to do international law classes. This was always something we discussed about what is the status of artificial islands and sea stations, because there's this whole idea about there's always been this big problem with minerals on the moon and minerals on the international seabed. The UN has this kind of wacky thing which they did in the 60s before there was a capacity to dig up rare earths from the bottom of the ocean, which we're only just starting to get now. But this idea that anything that gets, apparently the UN agreed in the 60s, which by the way was before mainland China was actually a member of the United Nations, that anything dug up from the ocean floor has to be shared as the common assets of mankind or whatever. That if somehow the revenues from it have to be shared with every poor third world country in the world, not just the kind of people that dug it up. That's one reason people never invested in it. But clearly we just have, China is very practical minded about this sort of thing, and they're just going to do what they like. But yeah, there's this thing as well. There's this gray zone about, are these real islands or not? And you can kind of say, well, they're artificial islands, so they don't count. These are artificial stations. They're like, SeaWorld or whatever, Sealand, like those artificial islands.
All the, analysts I've spoken to really don't believe that it meets the definition of a land mass as defined by UNCLOS. So they're trying to make it that way, but their view of UNCLOS says, no, it's not. But the reality of the situation is like they have harbors now, they have airstrips, they have anti-aircraft stations.
And China's very logical and hard to refute response to that, very correct and technical assertion is, what are you going to do about it?
Oh, exactly. It's like, I just love, well, we need to have discussions on this. Well, it's our territory. We're here. We're not move. That's the end of the discussion. And it's like, other regional disputes when two sides are at diametrically opposed positions and can't see any way to a middle ground, then it's fruitless. And that's where we are with this whole South China Sea, and it's going to move on to the East China Sea eventually.
And
the next step is going to be the South China Sea air defense identification zone.
They already tried putting over Okinawa, which upset people, But the thing is as well, you've got a government that isn't working on electoral terms. They're not, they don't answer to anybody. They can do everything on a 20-year plan, and they can do everything in the increments of inches, and then 1 weekend create a whole island. And as with Russia and with China, saying that's hypocritical is, of course, it's almost too obvious to say. It's a waste of time saying it, but for the sake of saying it, when Ishihara from the Tokyo governor was saying, "Hey, let's put a lighthouse and a ferry ramp on one of those disputed islands in Southeast Asia," and China went, apeshit. They were burning down shopping malls, and there's changing the status quo and outrage, and as a response to that, nothing happened. Japan, prohibits Japanese people. I mean, in Korea, Dokdo is like a tourist attraction for nationalists. They go there, wave the flag, and hey, screw you, Japan, look at me waving a flag here. And that's all cool. But, in Japan, those islands are like Japanese get detained by the Coast Guard when they go even near those islands.
Yeah. do not go to Senkaku for
we don't
any
want to upset
purpose.
China. We don't want to make any trouble. We're just going to hold the islands. We're not going to do anything with them. It's totally cool. You know, you come and say, we're going to keep saying it's ours, whatever. But, you know, and China, that's kind of responding, trying to be sensitive towards China. But, you know, China's kind of saying, okay, don't change the status quo, don't do anything with that. But look at what the hell they're doing with the other islands.
I know. I was like, we're not changing the status quo. We're just building on our territory that you think is yours.
It's like downtown Beijing. I love that comeback, which is exactly what the French say about nuclear testing in Tahiti. We ask, why do you test in Tahiti? You know, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean near New Zealand. And well, it's just the same as testing in Paris. And all the New Zealanders, well, why don't you test in Paris then?
Not so much the same.
But yeah, it's by the way, Robert P. Pot shot. These are not pot shots against Koreans at all. I mean, you know, we go around the nuances of each culture. But you know, Steve lives in Korea, and you've lived in Korea for a long time. You know, we poke fun, but geez, we get to poke fun at Japan pretty soon. I mean, it's part of, you know, I don't think we took any pot shots at Koreans.
Jealous of Gangnam Style. Oh God.
I am pretty jealous of Gangnam Style. I'm going to admit to that. Actually, I don't think I could ever top Gangnam Style, no matter how hard I tried. But yes, but this is the thing. And so, you know, doing the tour of, you know, critically looking at news from Korea and China. I mean, the other big story in the last few weeks is this. And you know what's funny? It's not just Asia. It's happening. It's a big thing coming up and getting bigger in Europe as well. But the refugee thing in Southeast Asia. And the people from Myanmar and Bangladesh who are, you know, going in boats now. But Thailand's kind of closed the gate, obviously. Under, you know, with martial law, they've tightened that area up. So now they're trying to get to Malaysia and Indonesia. And so I assume you've been following this a little bit. I've only followed this at a high level. But for a start, who are these boat people, and what is the background to these people?
Well, I mean, so it's really it's a really sad situation, and part of it goes way back, and that's one of the things that's sad is that, you know, once that those shallow graves were discovered in Thailand and whatnot, the border area, that's when it really caught the media attention. You know, but this has been going on for years. So you really have two distinct kinds of groups of people. And I'll actually be speaking to an anthropologist on Monday for next week's show about this in greater detail. But, you know, so one part you have the Rohingya Muslims, which aren't classified as, are basically not recognized as citizens in Myanmar. So
Myanmar was being, they said, if you even say the word, how do you pronounce it?
Rohingya.
So if you even say the word Rohingya, we're out of here. You know, we don't, that's not valid conversation. They don't exist.
Yeah. So basically, you know, Rohingyas aren't allowed to basically be in Myanmar, Burma, whatever you want to call it. They don't have any rights there. They aren't considered citizens. They're considered illegal immigrants, and they want them out. The other group of people are Bangladeshi migrants, which are essentially trying to get to a different country to have a more prosperous life, you know, better work environments. So, you know, they're also illegal migrants in several areas as well, because they aren't being claimed by their own country and not welcome in other countries. And so you have two groups of stateless people.
There's one other thing I'd add to that as well. So my dad lives in Phuket, and I've been down there a couple of times. Phuket's been going through massive development and construction in the last 20 years, you know, mind-boggling construction. All of that construction just about, you know, has been basically from Myanmar labor. And those people live literally in, you know, corrugated iron shacks behind these luxury things that are being set up. And, you know, and that has been a big part of the engine of Thailand's growth, is this honestly, you know, close to slave type, you know, labor that they get from illegal migrants from Myanmar. And perhaps that the negative attention that's been drawing has been led partly to the crackdown that's happened there in Thailand, that's now forcing people to, rather than walk overland, I guess.
Well, yeah, and then that's exactly right. So what happened was the overland route was used initially, but then there was a crackdown. So then that closed off, sent people into the ocean to do, you know, the boat people route. But then you also had the government and other military people get involved with it, and you had the camps. And then once people did get to Thailand or other areas, then you would have them being held for ransom, so the other people could get more money. And this, I mentioned this in last week's podcast. So they would pay between $2,000 and $3,000 to go from like Myanmar into Thailand. And then once in Thailand, they'd be ransomed. They'd be paid. They had to pay to go over to Thailand, and then they'd be ransomed for another $2,000 to $3,000 more. Yeah. But the average annual wage in Myanmar is like $65 a year. So then they have to scrape together all this money from those, and it's a horrible situation. And no one really wants, to accept them because of the huge drain on, the resources of the government as well. Because we're talking thousands and thousands of people. I mean, I think the UN put it at something like 120,000 Bangladeshis in the migrant crisis over the last few years alone. And right now, in the past few weeks, they've clocked in over 7,000 in the water. It's just staggering numbers.
Yeah. And the numbers are not dissimilar to what's happening in Europe at the same time at the moment with the thing there. I've told you, but I'm such a fan of Vice News. I find the whole small, lean model and the storytelling model, it's got its flaws, of course, but as a counterbalance to how far in the wrong direction, big news media has gone. I love it, and the coverage, they've given a lot of coverage to the European migration crisis, and to including actually shooting in Libya on the side there, and what the Coast Guard there is kind of helpless with these, with the gangs that are moving people. But it's a very similar model as well. I mean, it's literally human trafficking, and sometimes they see police coming, and the human traffickers will sink the boat, get rid of the evidence, which is the people. And there are thousands and thousands of people dying in the Mediterranean Sea. And the same scenario is playing out in Southeast Asia at the moment as well. And it's funny, what it reminds me of? It wasn't such a great movie. It was a disappointment as a movie. But reading, and even the director admitted this, but reading the interviews with, was it Neil Blomkamp about the movie Elysium?
I never saw that movie.
Okay, so it's a science fiction movie, and it's about, all the rich people in the world live on a very nice space station with medical machines that can fix anything. And, the rest of the world is kind of kept in poverty and kind of living on this hellhole on the planet. And you have these, people with children with diseases who try to, make these kind of desperate runs up to the space station to try to get their kid into a machine to fix them or something like that. And although the movie wasn't done very well, and for various reasons, there are a lot of, this was where he made a few really good movies on his own, but then he did his first big Hollywood movie with all the Hollywood people putting input in, and it kind of got a little bit ruined. But he kind of mentioned the story itself. He was saying this isn't a science fiction or an allegory. This is actually happening. Kind of at that time, this is 2 or 3 years ago, and I was kind of thinking, well, okay, sure, there are always people trying to get into richer countries or whatever. But with the amount of deaths and risk and the scale of it happening and the clear desperation of the people that are doing it at the moment, the more I'm reading, everything I've been seeing like the last 2 or 3 months where this has suddenly just exploded as an issue, both Southeast Asia and Mediterranean at the same time, it really brings home, actually, holy crap, he was, South African director, maybe
he was completely on top of it.
And it's exactly like this movie. And in the movie, there are mercenaries on the ground who, rocket launchers shooting down the refugee ships that are trying to go up and everything like that. But yeah, it was, I don't know. So Ty Givens says it was a good movie. I think it was a really, really good concept. And I still like Blomkamp, but, he admits himself, he didn't really do the movie the best way. It was a bit disappointing for me as a movie, but it was a really interesting concept. And it is very true.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah. Watch it with low expectations and it'll be good. By the way, have you seen Kung Fury?
I can't bring myself to watch that.
Oh, come on.
I honestly didn't even make it through the David Hasselhoff music video for it. I couldn't even make it through that.
You couldn't make it through the Hoff?
I couldn't make it through the Hoff.
Oh, well, no, listen, there are Vikings riding Tyrannosauruses, killing Nazis with laser beams.
Maybe tomorrow. So we'll see.
I don't know. I guess you give it, love it or hate it. For me, it was the greatest cinematic experience I've experienced in the last 15 years. It was only 30 minutes long, but Man, I don't know what the Swedes are drinking, but keep drinking it. I enjoyed that. So what else is news in the region? I guess we should talk about Japan. We've been talking all the time about other Asian stuff. Well, so from your perspective, other than, I mean, the only really big news at the moment is it's a huge deal in Japan, but so they lost, they got hacked and lost 1.25 million pension records.
Well, yes, and that's why the United States is now enveloping Japan in its cybersecurity umbrella.
Yeah, I mean, the NSA's motto is "Trust us, we know what we're doing." I'm sure it's going to be fine. But yeah. I mean, so this is just more of the normal kind of facepalm kind of stuff of, it turns out that the government was storing pension data without encryption or passwords. And it was just, people.
Well, see, and this is the thing that just boggles my mind is that, you read about this stuff, and Japan certainly isn't alone in this. And God knows Korea is one of the worst in terms of cybersecurity I've ever seen.
Really?
What was it 2013, 2014 they got hacked 3-4 times.
Yeah.
I mean, just awful. I mean Korea's awful, but I mean this was just bad. I mean, this was bad. The whole notion that the United States needed to wrap Japan under the umbrella was because they didn't have a lot of defense hackers to protect Japan, and this was going to protect Japan more because of the 2020 Olympic concerns. And then 2 days later, boom, massive hack.
And I mean, every country, you can apply the phrase, X country is a land of contradictions, of course, to any country. Maybe Japan and Korea are extreme examples of cases that you could apply that to. But for me, I'm applying for a new telephone at the moment for my new apartment, which I have to do with NTT. There's still a de facto monopoly with landlines and stuff like that in Japan. But okay,
why do you have a landline?
Well, we've got fiber optic landline, which connects me to a 100T high-speed internet connection. I need to get the internet connection, but in order to get the internet connection, I have to validate the wire that goes into my apartment, which I have to do with NTT. So, NTT, largest telecommunications company in the world, some of the highest speed internet in the world, some of the best, and highest, technology, internet, networks and routers. They invented the internet-capable phone, the iMode. 10 years ahead of the rest of the world. They invented smartphones before 10 years before, Apple and so on. So, the epitome of Japanese high tech, you're living in the future, Japan, NTT. I applied for a new phone and they're like, I have to write down my name and get my Gaijin identity card and send it to them on a fax. I'm like, well, who has a fax? Seriously. And they're like, well, you can go up to a convenience store and you can pay money and send a fax from there. And I'm like, really? I can take a photo with my iPhone and make a PDF, and I can email you a PDF. Can I just email you a PDF? It'll be clear. And they're like, no, it has to be a fax. So and they said, oh, when you go up to the place, because the faxes, they scan in really low resolution, it's really hard to read. So can you also handwrite in large letters beside it so we don't misread the spelling on the ID card?
Oh my God.
I had to do this. I had to jump through the fax hoop. I mean, this is I'm guessing NTT has a monopoly on all the fax sales in Japan. It's like a racket that they're forcing all of their customers to send them one fax every time they make.
That is a hoot. That is a hoot.
And it's so when the Japanese government recently announced a worldwide 24-hour emergency number for Japanese anywhere in the world. Whenever you're in trouble, if you happen to have just been kidnapped by ISIS or anything like that, and you need to call for consular assistance anywhere. They developed this international number, and the immediate reaction, all my Gaijin friends says, "What? There's no fax number." But yes, it's a land of contradictions. But I don't know. So from your perspective, I mean, apart from the fact, okay, so wait a minute. Of course, we are celebrating as a Korean resident, as a Japan permanent resident here. We are celebrating 50 years of warm friendship and close ties and cooperation at the moment, through extensive intergovernment meetings and cooperation and the general love fest that we know as Korean-Japanese relations.
Well, I like how you phrase that, extensive intergovernmental meetings, and that's how I phrase it, because Abe and Park can't sit in the same room, but everybody else can and get shit done.
And I mean, I hate to bring this up again, but Park's dad and Abe's dad were like best friends.
I know. But and this is what the U.S. undersecretary really it didn't play out well here, but she said it correctly. It's easy to vilify a former oppressor for cheap political gains, and that's exactly what Park is doing.
But the response to that was Park expanded the budget for lobbying in Washington to make Washington understand them better.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's my point's always been, it's very clear it's politically motivated, because you have the finance ministers meeting, you just had the defense ministers meet, not only just discuss things, but meet face to face for the first time in a few years, and settle on the whole thing. The thing just drives me nuts is how adamant Seoul has been to get Japan to promise that with the implementation of collective self-defense, you won't come on South Korean soil unless we invite you.
We should be very careful about how you phrase that as well.
Since day one. It's like everybody around the world knows that's the case. They've said it I don't know how many times, but you still want to drive that stupid point home for domestic points.
It does. I try to remain objective. I know. I admit. I'm upfront with my biases. I've lived here for a long time. I read the news from this perspective. Sure, I've got probably a pro-Japan bias perspective. Sure, but I do try to look at this with as objective a view as possible. And the whole fact that it was Lee who had to back out when it was revealed that when they was going to sign a secret defense deal between Korea and Japan, that when Japanese Aegis destroyers in the Sea of Japan, or East Sea, or whatever you want to call it, when they detected missile launches from North Korea against South Korea, Japan would agree to pass that information to South Korea to warn them if they detected it first. And it was that agreement to share that information. Like, hey, wait a minute, they're attacking you, dude. The idea that any kind of military cooperation agreement between Japan and Korea that wasn't put through the parliament, and they actually shut that down. They preferred not to know that North Korea was launching missiles at them than to hear what was happening from Japan.
Even now, it's so stupid that you have this intelligence sharing deal between South Korea and Japan, but all the information has to go through the United States first. Yeah. And both parties will only agree to share certain pieces of it. It's like, come on.
I don't want to. I can go on about this forever, but the thing which got me the worst, I think the low point of all of this, and this was like a year ago, was in Africa, the peacekeeping thing. In Central Africa, wherever it was, where those Korean troops ran out of bullets, and
they made a huge stink out of the Japanese logistics team giving them the ammunition that they needed.
Their own government didn't give them enough ammo, and they ran out of ammo, and they were surrounded, and they were in trouble, and the Japanese gave them ammo to use to defend themselves, and it was like the worst thing Japan ever did. And then the Korean government was just disowning that they even asked for it.
Yeah.
Who would want to be doing national service and sent to Africa and run out of bullets and get criticized for asking for bullets? So the extent, I mean, I can, of course, legitimate issues, legitimate concerns, and all this sort of stuff. There are all these things that Korea legitimately has, but you do think sometimes, do you have to go that far? I mean, we get the point,
Yeah.
But,
no, I mean,
I just want Korea. I just want them to get along. I really do. I really want everyone to be holding hands and singing Kumbaya if that's possible at some point.
It would be nice. I don't see it happening for another generation.
Another generation? That's pretty depressing. Another generation.
But I mean, honestly, I don't know how it is in Japan, but everyone who's in office now, they're playing to their, constituency, which doesn't want, close relations with Japan. They want to have a functional relationship, but not close relationship. And as long as those are the people that are, in office, and you still have the elderly population with the voting majority, as long as that's the case, that's the way it's going to remain.
Yeah. Well, here's to hoping sometime within the calendar year that somehow some kind of token gesture of forced friendship can be realized in any sort of a level, because the fact is, at the person-to-person levels, and as you said, at every single level, short of the presidential election accountability area, it seems to be that the human ties between Korea and Japan are close, have always been close, and have always been pretty good, actually. So let's hope they can do something like that. Question, another topic, Philippines. What's happening in the Philippines lately? I noticed going through your newsfeed recently, there seem to be continuing explosions and trouble. And
well, I mean,
what's going on?
So Philippines mainly has 4 different areas. You have the the northern area, the Luzon area. You have Visayas, which is the middle portion, Palawan off to the side, and then the southern Mindanao region, which is where the Muslim autonomous region is being formed. And it's always been, they've always wanted to be separate from the Philippines, and that's where you had the Biff and the MILF back in the day.
Love the MILF. No, actually, I don't know. Against the MILF. Against the MILF. But honestly, how can you not support them?
Well, the government is now, because the Moro Islamic Liberation Front has now formed a partnership with the Philippine government. But the BIFF, the Bangsamoro, Islamic freedom fighters, they're still causing problems. That's where the explosions take place. You have the tie-ins with Abu Sayyaf, and they've pledged allegiance to ISIS as well. And that's where the problems. And this goes back decades, and some like 50 to 100,000 people have been killed. So I mean, unfortunately, you do see stories about this all the time, and hopefully under the power sharing agreement, and things will get better. But the scary thing is, I mean, that's scary, but I mean, if you look at like U.S. State Department warnings, it's like, you know, Davao, Mindanao, all those areas, that's like the one place United States says, do not go. You know, go to the Philippines, have a great time, don't go to Mindanao.
Go to Cuba, go to Venezuela, go to North Korea. We don't care, just don't go. Well, yeah, I mean, you know, yeah, from a long way back. I mean, this is America was never officially doing anything in the Philippines, of course, other than, you know, standing around twiddling their thumbs and, you know, saluting the Philippines. But of course, the Americans were directly involved in that conflict as well in the past.
Well, I mean, they bought the Philippines for $20 million at the end of the 1812 Spanish-American War. You know, it was a smoking deal, unbeknownst to the Filipinos.
Yeah. So we've got 10 minutes to go. So let's talk a little bit about this series. I mean, fact is, we probably have more or less once a month, maybe once every 2 months. We've always found some opportunity to come on and catch up on stuff. But this is really cool, because the opening up of this Wednesday slot, this is something I've always wanted to figure out. I haven't had the extra time to add another show, but now that opportunities come up, and the first person I said, let's do a regular show together was Steve, because I learned so much from talking with you, and we can have, you can have really interesting discussions and get a little bit, get a bit more worldly context, and not just talk about Japan as I do, talking about Japan inside Japan all the time. But I really love getting the external perspective and the broader perspective that you have. So we want to continue doing this. I don't know. So what do you guys want to see in terms of a theme? The title, I like the title. What do you think of the title? What's Up, Asia? I like What's Up, Asia.
What's up? Raise the roof.
And by the way, I just while we were doing technical setup, you've got such a good radio voice. I mean, I like I said, I feel completely inadequate in responses, but perhaps we can do a little section at the end of the show with your permission, that you can just randomly do the movie announcer voice on random phrases that people ask for in the comments.
Oh, we can do that.
Okay. So anyone who wants like the movie intro radio voice phrase spoken by our resident radio voice here, you can go from now. There's a 40-second lag, so it'll take a minute for that to come out. But okay, Warp 1, engage.
From Sean Bruno, Warp 1, engage.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I said that too soon. I need to leave a proper audio space on the end of that to capture that. But that was just so good, I just couldn't stop myself from reacting. So. Okay, anything else that anyone else wants to hear Steve say? Another thing that I've got
Alan Alda. Wow.
Hey, I get that. You know, just when you say that, I get that. Wow, that wow has that.
Oh, really?
Alda. Yeah, that was funny.
All right, here's another one. Jet Set Radio.
Wow. I would just have to say wow. You know, sorry, that was see, tingling. We got tingles in the comments. You know, so. I'm going to throw out one request to the people here. I'm going to need a regular, we're going to need like a thumbnail, a regular kind of a theme, a thumbnail. And I know that you guys are pretty good with the thumbnails generally, and I know that you guys probably already have ideas for us. But I'd actually like a regular theme. Like we have with the 2.5 Oyajis. I love that very simple graphic kind of a thing. And I love the ideas that you guys come up with, which are usually infinitely better than my ideas. So, I would definitely... everyone is, by the way, completely digging that last suggestion. Oh, good morning, Vietnam. You're being asked for good morning, Vietnam.
All right, here we go.
You know? Yeah.
Good morning, Vietnam!
Now, I'm pretty sure Steve will not be able to be broadcasting from the same apartment. He's probably going to be kicked out, and it's probably going to be somewhere else next week. Although people can't see it, but you're actually in a foam padding, sound.
I have sound insulation. Although I'm sure my wife is going, "What the hell is going on in there?"
We're making movies. That's what we're doing. That was really good. So yes, apparently you sound like the guy who announces flights at the airport of the person who draws the lotto numbers. But yes,
the white
people
zone is for immediate parking and unloading only. The red zone. Oh, wait, there is no parking in the red zone.
Your talents are just so wasted here. You realize that I feel completely inadequate and in awe. But yes, so anyway, we are going to thumbnail suggestions. We're open. Branding for the show. It's only going to be a once a month show, but we're going to make them a really good once a month show. And honestly, this is the first episode, and this is for commenters to participate in as well.
Yeah, please let us know.
Yeah. Any ideas, any requests, any suggestions? Anyone wants me to dance like a monkey? I'll consider it. I'll consider it for cheap clicks and yucks. So. Yes, it's nice to see. Oh, wait a minute. So we have another request here from L-Round4. Welcome to the world of tomorrow.
Welcome to the world of tomorrow.
Man, that's good. See, he's got some legit skills. So I think we'll keep this if you like this. I think this is a legit mandatory feature for the end of the show.
I certainly enjoy it.
Yeah. I'm glad you enjoy it because I enjoy you enjoying it. So yes, I'm still sorting out the routine for next week. I might actually have a reality star on next week. We're trying to sort out the schedule a little bit at the moment.
Excellent.
But Mariko Lockridge, if you missed, by the way, she's a video journalist, and another thing for this show as well, we're still trying to figure out a good format for this. But one thing is, on Steve's podcast, he actually gets actual legitimate news people on every now and then, which is crazy. And Barringer, no, I'm not going to bar like a sheep. You shut your dirty mouth. So that is something as well. I've always wanted to get some news people. I'm a fan. I'm kind of a groupie of some news people. So that might be something that we might do every now and then as well. Get some legit news people on. For me, I want this to be kind of like a bold Asian version of Anchorman. I don't know if that's achievable or possible, but I want to be Roy Burgundy, and I want to have a room that smells like mahogany. And if that's achievable, I want to get as close in that direction as possible with this. So I don't know. What are your goals and aspirations for a weekly show with this?
A weekly show? How about monthly show?
Monthly. Sorry, monthly show.
No, I mean, I think it's nice because, like Asian News Weekly and the other podcasts are straight up news shows. And yes, I do bring in analysts to discuss things on a more professional basis. But, the Watercooler Chats that we have are very nice. And being able to interact directly with the comments during the process is equally engaging.
Well, that's right. And it is. I think it has to be a rule. This has to be. I saw some people are a little bit sensitive to the perceived mocking of some, but no, everything will be mocked, and this is a warning I should put on the top of this. When we say how's it, what's up, Asia? It's what's up, Asia. Of course, we're not going to be culturally sensitive and respectful. We're within reasonable boundaries. Of course, we're not going to go full Australian on you, but we are going to. Sorry, and someone comment that when I'm criticizing Australia, that's the only time that I'm serious. But yeah, of course, this is it. We're gonna have the fun conversations, and yes, I'm looking forward to seeing where we go with that. So okay. We've got there are two more requests here. Lucas Musser is asking if you could do the voice of the spaceship from Space Odyssey. So can you do Dave? I can't do that or something.
No, Dave is the astronaut. Just what the hell do you think you're doing, Dave?
Very good. And there's also a request from Pugchan asking you to do Brick from. We're getting a little bit away from the announcer kind of voice thing, but there is the Brick from.
I don't know what I'm saying.
I love Lamp. You're being asked to say I love Lamp.
I love Lamp.
Very good. Okay, so thanks for joining, everybody. We're going to be doing this once a month, so join us next time for What's Up Asia, which is the funnest way to improve your brain cells on Asia stuff. And definitely check out there's an annotation card, but all the information and information below this video for the best Asia news podcast and news catch-up video and sound that we have in Asia, run by this man Steve Miller. So make sure you follow that and improve those brain cells and enjoy the yucks and the fun with us every first Wednesday of the month going forward. So thank you. Yeah, and look forward to working more with you, sir, on a now fixed and regular basis with a branded show, which I love thumbnails and suggestions for branding from the people. So see you guys again. So next week, stand by. I'm still sorting out the monthly schedule for the other weeks at the moment, but come back same time next week for another awesome show, and come back definitely first week of July for another show with Mr. Steve Miller.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks for everyone coming out tonight.
Peace.